This is the story of how humans discovered cooking. Not the recipe part, the moment heat and food collided by accident and quietly rewired what it means to be human. Because here's the problem nobody thinks about when they picture a caveman gnawing on a raw haunch of meat. That caveman shouldn't exist. Not with a brain like his, not on a diet like that. Let's talk about energy. Your brain, sitting quietly inside your skull right now doing basically nothing more strenuous than reading these words, is burning through roughly 20% of your entire daily energy supply. Just to exist. Just to idle. No other primate on Earth can afford that. A chimpanzee's brain uses somewhere around 8%. That gap is not a small accounting difference. It's the difference between a species that can support abstract thought, planning, language, culture, and a species that physically cannot. So here's the question that should genuinely bother you. If raw food provides a fixed amount of usable energy, how did a lineage of primates with smaller guts, smaller jaws, and weaker teeth than a chimpanzee somehow end up fueling a brain nearly 3 times the size? Raw meat is bound up in tough connective tissue. Raw starches are locked inside rigid plant cell walls the human gut can barely crack open. Chimpanzees, who eat an almost entirely raw diet, spend nearly half of their waking hours chewing, not eating, chewing, grinding raw plant matter into something small enough to swallow, extracting a fraction of its actual caloric value because their bodies are doing all the processing work that heat could have done for them in seconds. Picture that. A chimpanzee spends more time chewing lunch than you spend at your entire job, and it still comes out behind on calories. In the 1990s, a primatologist named Richard Wrangham started asking a question almost nobody else in his field was seriously asking. What if the reason humans look so biologically different from every other great ape has nothing to do with tools or hunting directly, and everything to do with one specific unglamorous behavior? Cooking. Wrangham's argument, now widely known as the cooking hypothesis, is genuinely elegant. Heat does chemically what your gut would otherwise have to do biologically. Cooking breaks down tough connective tissue in meat before it reaches your teeth. It ruptures plant cell walls, releasing starches your intestines can absorb almost immediately instead of fighting to extract over hours. Cooking is pre-digestion. You're outsourcing the metabolic labor of eating to a fire, before the food even touches your mouth. Studies feeding identical foods, raw versus cooked, have found cooked food yields significantly more usable calories from the same quantity of raw material. Same food. More energy extracted. Let's compare bodies. A gorilla's gut is an oversized fermentation chamber, built to slowly break down massive quantities of raw, fibrous plant matter over hours. A gorilla eats roughly 18 kilograms of raw vegetation a day just to stay fed. Humans, by comparison, have a digestive tract that's almost embarrassingly small for a primate our size. Multiple studies of modern humans attempting strict raw food diets have documented chronic energy deficits and, in women, disrupted reproductive cycles, even while eating what looks like plenty of food by volume. The gut we actually have isn't built for raw food. It's built for food that's already been through the fire first. Your own body is evidence. You are anatomically a species that bet its entire digestive strategy on cooked food, so completely that going back to what every other ape eats every single day makes you sick. So when did that bet get placed? This is where the story gets genuinely tricky because proving ancient fire use is harder than it sounds. Ash can come from wildfires. Charred bone can happen by accident. The oldest confirmed evidence of controlled fire, from Wonderwerk Cave in South Africa, dates to roughly 1 million years ago, burnt plant ash found deep inside a cave far from any natural wildfire source. Solid, real evidence. But Wrangham's hypothesis pushes the cooking timeline back even further, closer to 1.8 to 2 million years ago, right when Homo erectus shows up with a noticeably bigger brain and smaller gut. And reliable fire evidence from that far back barely exists. So instead of looking for a fire pit, researchers look at the body itself. Homo erectus shows up in the fossil record with dramatically reduced tooth size, a smaller jaw, weaker jaw muscle attachment points, and a smaller rib cage suggesting a smaller gut. Every one of those changes is exactly what you'd expect from a species that shifted to eating food already softened before it reached the mouth. Evolution does not shrink expensive organs for no reason. A smaller gut is metabolically cheaper to run, which means every calorie previously spent maintaining excess digestive tissue became available for something else. And there was something else very hungry waiting to spend it. There's a concept in evolutionary biology called the expensive tissue hypothesis. Metabolically expensive organs, brain tissue and gut tissue among the priciest in the entire body, exist in a kind of biological tug of war. You cannot easily grow one without shrinking the metabolic cost of the other, because the total energy budget of the body is not unlimited. Cooking shrinks the digestive workload. A shrinking gut frees up energy that used to be spent on digestion, and that freed energy has somewhere to go, straight into the single most metabolically greedy organ in the human body. Your gut got smaller so your brain could get bigger. That trade, quietly negotiated over evolutionary time by nothing more sophisticated than fire and repetition, is arguably one of the single most consequential biological transactions in the history of our species. Somebody, roughly 2 million years ago, was walking around with a slightly smaller gut and a slightly bigger brain than their neighbor, and had no idea they were the beneficiary of one of evolution's better trades. But the story doesn't stop at biology, because cooking changed behavior too, in ways that still shape your life today. Cooking requires a fire that has to be tended, which means people have to sit still, together, in one place, doing something other than actively foraging. That sounds small. It isn't. That's potentially one of the earliest forms of a shared, scheduled human activity in our entire evolutionary history. A meal, cooked together, eaten together, at a predictable time, in a predictable place. Chimpanzees don't really have this. They forage individually, eating as they go, wherever the food happens to be. There's no shared table, no waiting for everyone to arrive before anyone eats. Cooking imposes structure because you cannot cook a meal instantly the way you grab and eat raw fruit. There's a delay built in. Gathering, preparing, tending the fire, waiting. That forced pause may be one of the earliest evolutionary pressures toward patience and cooperation in the entire hominin lineage. Some researchers argue cooking fires became the earliest form of a home base, a fixed point a group returns to at a predictable time, which allowed division of labor. Some forage while others tend the fire, trusting everyone reconvenes for the same shared meal. That structure, gather, cook, share, eat together, isn't a modern invention. It's something your ancestors were doing for hundreds of thousands of years before agriculture, before writing, before anything you'd recognize as civilization. Every time you sit down to a meal with someone else at a predictable time, you're unknowingly participating in a ritual that may be nearly 2 million years old. Here's the wildest implication in the whole hypothesis. If cooking really did free up the metabolic budget that built the modern human brain, then fire isn't just a tool humans used. Fire helped build the tool user. We didn't discover cooking and then go build civilization with our existing brains. Cooking may have been a necessary precondition for those brains to exist in their current form at all. That's a strange thing to sit with. The relationship isn't humans invented fire and then got smart. It's closer to fire made room for us to get smart, and then, once we were smart enough, we used that intelligence to do everything else. Standing on a foundation quietly laid down by a piece of meat that happened to fall too close to a flame a very long time ago. The cooking hypothesis remains genuinely debated. Direct fire evidence from 2 million years ago doesn't exist yet in the way researchers would like. And some scientists argue the anatomical changes could be explained by other factors entirely. Science doesn't always hand you a clean answer, and this is one of those genuinely open questions. But what's not in dispute is this. At some point, your ancestors began transforming raw, energy-stingy food, deliberately, repeatedly using heat, into something their bodies could use more efficiently than any other primate on Earth ever has. And that transformation happened early enough and mattered enough to leave its fingerprints permanently written into the shape of your skull, the size of your gut, and the extraordinary organ currently reading every word of this sentence. Somewhere in your family tree, someone sat by a fire, ate something transformed by heat, and without knowing it, changed what their descendants' brains would become. You've been doing it your whole life without a second thought. Every meal you've ever cooked is a direct, unbroken continuation of a 2 million-year-old negotiation between your ancestors and a flame. So, would evolution have gotten you here without it? Let me know what you think in the comments.